Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a hazy IPA from a new to me brewer. So this is Stoup Brewing Company out of Seattle, Washington. The specific beer is called Sandals Flannels. It is a hazy IPA that clocks in at 7% ABV. So label art on this one, it is aptly named. It looks rather actually like a bunch of hipsters in a bar, indeed wearing sandals and flannels. So pretty cool label art. I like it. It's very colorful. All right, gently, we're going to get this one cracked. Gently. I've been enjoying this trend of new brewers that I've been getting through Tavour, brand new ones I've never seen. So I'm getting to try a whole bunch of brand new beers, which is always exciting. I'm going to get that poured right in. This one is not really having any problem at all forming a head. I'm going to give it a little more agitation, let it just get a little more substantive. I'm going to slow it down, and we won't quite get the whole pint in there right now because I really did want to give it a chance to form a nice solid head. So I can tell you right away, the aroma is tremendous. It's got a very pronounced aroma. It smells fantastic. Visually, yeah, this is hazy. It's not like milkshake hazy, but it's definitely occluded. It is not crystal clear, and it is that classic IPA yellow color, that bright yellow with just a slight twinge of orange. In terms of carbonation, it's quite active. I can see some very small, fine champagne-like bubbles as well as some kind of medium small. Head obviously formed beautifully. Nice, rich, thick, creamy head. Let's get right over it for a good proper sniff. Wow, that smells so fruity. That really does smell rather like a glass of juice. So there's a nice mix of citrus coming out of there, and there's a nice mix of tropical fruit. Citrus smells very orange, slight little bit of lemon. Tropical fruit smells kind of like a mix of pineapple and guava and bananas, actually, is what I'm picking up. Yeah, it really smells quite nice. There's even a slight suggestion of strawberry. Overall, absolutely delicious smelling beer, very pronounced aroma. It looks exactly right, formed a nice head. Let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. That's very good. That's a very tasty beer. Okay. So first things first, the body on this feels a nice full medium, which is exactly what I expect of an IPA sitting in the Goldilocks zone of 7%. The mouthfeel has a little bit of resistance to it, as you would expect from an IPA, and agitating around the palate on this one, it does get very lush, very creamy, very silky, very velvety. It's got this lush sense to it when you agitate around the palate. In terms of what actually translates into the glass. So when you swallow, it's got this interesting mix of kind of bright floral flavors with a little bit of citrus undertones. Again, it's kind of dominant leaning towards more like citrus rind, citrus zest, and citrus oils than it is the actual flesh of the fruit. But in this one, there is a little bit more of like a sweet suggestion, like, yeah, that does kind of taste a bit like fruit juice mixed in the middle. In terms of bitters on this one, this is not pungently bitter. This is kind of harkening back to a classic hazy, so it's really focusing on bringing out these aromatics and these underlying flavors without extracting all of the alphas into the base beer. So if you're not a fan of very hoppy IPAs, this is definitely one I think you would enjoy. In terms of how this impacts the finish, as you might expect, without the real intensity of bitters to kind of drive it through, the finish on this one is not that long. Overall, it's about average for an IPA, for a hazy. Average for a hazy. And, you know, where it finishes is also very typical IPA in that there's no suggestion of dryness at all. It's very much wet and around all the way to the end. But a very, very tasty beer. So I was really focusing on the hop qualities. It is a hazy after all. So on second sip here, we're going to let everything intensify, and I'm going to really pay mind to this malt bill because it was in there, but then I started focusing on the fruit and the citrus. So let's just jump back in and see what this malt bill has in store. Very juicy, very fruity up front. Citrus, a little bit of tropical notes, notably mangoes. And underneath that, there's this clear, it almost puts me in mind a little bit of a Pilsner malt bill, the way that it comes through in this glass, because there's this definite baked good quality about it. It's got this graininess to it, and elements of it remind me of beers I've had that have had grains of paradise in the ingredient list. It's got this really nice quality to it. And in terms of what happens after kind of the big burst of fruit and juice and the malt bill and its kind of grain qualities start to come through, that's when the bitters really start to enter the equation. And again, this is not a West Coast style IPA. It's not 100 IBUs. It's probably 20, maybe 15 to 20, possibly 25 if I were just to hazard a guess. But the profile of them, aside from the hops bringing out these fruity undertones and citrus undertones, is very much an earthy kind of hop bittering. That's where the bitter flavor is falling. There's no real resin quality, no pine quality. It's much more akin to that earthy vibe you get from, say, a British Fuggle hop. Overall, a very, very nice beer. This is a well put together hazy. People that love hazies are probably really going to like this. It's not intense on the bitters. It's big on the fruit impact, and it's also got this underlying graininess. So yeah, you know you're still drinking a beer. I absolutely love it. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. So this was Stoup Brewing Company's Sandals and Flannels, a hazy IPA clocking in at 7% ABV. Stoup Brewing Company is based in Seattle, Washington. So starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was absolutely fantastic and quite pungent. Honestly, it was as big and bold and present as you would normally get on an Imperial, but in normal form. Tons of fruit came off of the nose on this. Really smelled fantastic. Didn't have to work for it. Had a really good sense of what aromatics they were going for in here, and a hint of what might be in the flavor profile. Overall, I love the aroma. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste on this beer, I really, really enjoyed. I thought this was a really delicious hazy. Really, the only thing that held it back from top marks for me was, yes, there were bitters, but they were so subtle. It just, for my money, it would have been a little better balanced and had a little more interesting flavor profile if the intensity of the bittering elements of the hops had come through just a little greater than they did. But it didn't miss the mark by much. The taste gets a 9 out of 10. For the body was really nice and right where I expected it to be for an IPA in this range. Body gets a perfect 10 out of 10. The mouthfeel had that classic IPA resistance to it. This one got really nice and velvety creamy when you agitated it around the palate. Felt fantastic, exactly as expected. Mouthfeel gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish was really just kind of middle of the road. Again, it's related to the bittering agents. Sure, it had pungent fruit flavors that jumped out at you and they were truly delicious, but they didn't have the staying power to really extend the length of the finish on this IPA. A little more hop bittering presence in there would have really helped extend it out. As it were, just average. Finish gets a 5 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did an absolutely tremendous job. Head and retention gets a 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook IPA, had a nice little bit of haze to it, exactly as advertised. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance overall in this beer I really enjoyed. There was a lot of interesting interplay between the hop characteristics and the grain bill. Really, the only thing that held this one back on the balance for me was just the relative lack of bittering elements that would have helped balance the entire beer out. And I'm not talking, you're looking for super high alpha acid content extraction during the boil. Just a little bit goes a long way if you're making a hazy. But this was nice, but the balance for me, it just needed a little more bitters to help give it some oomph. It would have livened up the beer quite a bit in my opinion. Overall, though, I did think the balance was above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. Subjectively, I liked the beer just fine. I thought it tasted very good. I enjoyed it. But, you know, IPAs are a very competitive, crowded marketplace, especially in the past few years with hazies, and they're kind of all over the board. This was a very, very tasty beer, but at its heart, it's still an IPA and, you know, just a little more presence of the bitter profile of the hop, which is historically the main dominant profile of the hop. Among them anyway, and certainly in an IPA, it's among the most important. They were there, but they were a bit too subtle for my liking. Feeling in the intangible, I rated average. It gets a 5 out of 10. Finally is an example of this style. Well, coming back full circle. This was a nice hazy IPA. Overall, I thought it was incredibly tasty. Very, very good beer and a very nice beer for a first beer from a brewer I've never tried anything from prior. Overall, this is definitely above average. There were so many things about this that I really, really liked. Just a few little minor nitpicks, a few little minor tweaks I would make to have it up near hazy perfection. But I did think it was well above average. Example of the style gets a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Stoup Brewing's Sandals and Flannels to an 86 out of 100. So yeah, absolutely this is above average. This may not be the exact kind of beer that after tasting once I would go back and personally grab for my own drinking pleasure, but I think that this is one of those very accessible hazies. For people that really, really, really don't like bitter beer, this is one to keep on your radar. Tons of flavor, had the basic underpinnings of your standard IPA. They just really, really, really dialed back the bittering elements of the hops and let all the underlying aromas and flavors come through that aren't necessarily bitter, kind of be the star of the show. So if that's your bag, then this is one I would definitely keep an eye out for. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when we go live to YouTube, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.